1990, the start of the final decade of the millennium, and a year when our world changed at an unprecedented rate. 1990 was the year that the Iron Curtain came crashing down, and a new European superstate prepared to steamroll into the 21st century. And while much of the world seemed involved in coming together, here at home, the nation is clearly at risk of coming apart. The nuclear doomsday clock moved backward in 1990, while the ominous ticking of an environmental time bomb sounded ever louder. During the next half hour, we'll bring you 1990, moments to remember and some things perhaps better forgotten. 1990, the year in review. In January, there was a major concern about sea train safety. This following the tragic death of 20-year-old Stephanie Ta, who was dragged to her death in December '89 when the door on a sea train failed to open. There were suspicions of a cover-up following the report on Ta's death and demands for a full public inquiry. Finally, a committee conducted on-camera sea train door tests, and the city hired an outside consultant to develop an educational program for LRT users. Early in 1990, there was a brief transit strike that extended through perhaps the 3 coldest days of the year. It ended quickly enough, but the current transit contract is up for renegotiation in the very near future. Major cuts to the Via Rail network became a fact of life. Along with the shutdown of the Canadian and other trains, 2,760 Via jobs were lost. The Canadian rolled through Calgary in the middle of January for the last time. 55 was the Lady Dinosaur's magic number. On January 20th, they broke the North American intercollegiate record for consecutive wins. Players and coaches alike were elated.
It feels great. It feels great. We did it as a team. We got all this way as a team, and it just feels really great.
We were shooting really well. We were playing really well as a team, which we've done game after game after 55 games. Defense was stellar, so we're absolutely enjoying what has happened right now.
And on January 29th, Raymond John Natishan, a native of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, was installed as Canada's 24th Governor General. In mid-February, a fire erupted at a tire dump in Hagersville, Ontario. For 17 days, it billowed clouds of smoke into the air. At the height of the fire, 2,000 nearby residents were forced from their homes. 5 teens were later charged with mischief in connection with the fire. In February, South African President F.W. de Klerk announced that after decades of having been banned, the African National Congress could stand as a legal political party. On February 11th, Nelson Mandela was released from Verster Prison north of Cape Town. He had spent the previous 20 years behind bars.
Now attention is now shifting to the leadership race. And I told the caucus this morning that I felt the time was now right for me to delegate my role as Leader of the Opposition to the Honorable Herb Gray, the Member of Parliament for Windsor West.
John Turner resigned as leader of the official opposition in the House of Commons. The language issue was hotly debated throughout most of 1990, and the heat was turned up by Sault Ste. Marie, which made itself officially English only. We began to hear a more insistent concern for national unity.
If that is a vision that is shared by more and more people, ultimately it will lead to the complete breakup of the country over linguistic issues. That's the last thing this country needs.
Pulp mills were big news in Alberta as the year began. On the Peace River system, the mill at Grand Prairie was found to be having an adverse effect on fish downstream in the Wapiti, and the Daishawa mill was racing toward startup. Meanwhile, a federally appointed review panel was sitting in judgment of Alberta Pacific's bid to erect a $1 billion plant in Athabasca, and its findings were not what ALPAC wanted to hear.
Construction should not be allowed to begin until these studies are complete and it's been ascertained that there is no hazard either to human health or to the ecosystems.
While seeming to go along with these cautions at first, the government decided 5 days before Christmas that economic considerations outweighed environmental ones and gave the project the green light. And in the boxing world, James Buster Douglas, the boy from Columbus, Ohio, beat world heavyweight boxing champ Mike Tyson in what may rank as one of the biggest upsets in sports history. It was March when the federal government decided that Sikh members of the RCMP may wear turbans and other religious garb. Western MPs and lobby groups opposed the change. Nor was this the only test of tolerance that Calgarians faced in 1990. March was a great month for Calgary sport fans. Swimmer Mark Tewksbury was named the 1990 Athlete of the Year. A double gold medalist at the Commonwealth Games in New Zealand, he also broke 3 world records at the Winter Nationals. We retired number 9 at the Saddle Dome on St. Patrick's Day and stashed away a lot of memories. And figure skater Kurt Browning from Caroline was the first Canadian male to win back-to-back world championships. By the spring of 1990, Prime Minister Mulroney realized that the deadline for ratifying the Meech Lake Accord was drawing very close. Without the accord, Quebec would remain outside the Constitution. But the agreement reached 4 years earlier had run out of steam. Provinces that had agreed to the accord now had new governments. New Brunswick Premier Frank McKenna put up the first red flag in a speech to his provincial legislature.
It is time that these linguistic battles stop, not only here but across the rest of Canada. It's time that people started talking about this national issue without recrimination, without loud voices.
During a news conference, he said time is running out.
I don't think Canadians realize how close to the brink we are, and I'm asking them to step back a bit.
While 1990 marked the birth of a new decade, it also marked the passing of several notable people in the entertainment field, as well as one very special American boy. A look back now at some people who may have touched your life.
Someday we'll find it, the rainbow connection, the lovers, the dreamers, and me.
Hey, you don't happen to speak English, do you?
Why, as a matter of fact, I do.
That's my wife!
What are you doing?
Gilligan, that plane was circling not looking for us. It was because he was in trouble.
We're in more trouble than he is. We're shipwrecked.
Well, he's shipwrecked, too.
I gotta be me. I just want to be alone.
Mary Ann jealous. Well, why not? I'm a whole new me.
I believe in God, and, I believe there's a heaven. I think when you die, you're going to go to a better place. And so I'm not really afraid of dying.
God, I love being a turtle!
And who wouldn't? This reptilian foursome, known as Leonardo, Donatello, Michelangelo, and Raphael, grossed $73 million in the first 3 weeks that their movie was on the big screen. By April, the Meech Lake Accord was already in trouble. The Newfoundland government, led by Premier Clyde Wells, refused to ratify the agreement.
And the mere fact that the Meech Lake Accord has not been passed does not mean that the legitimate concerns of Quebec have been properly dealt with. They have not. Those concerns were well-founded, they were legitimate, they should be properly and fairly and fully responded to. They have not, if the Meech Lake Accord is not passed. So the debate to do so should still continue.
On April 10th, the GST passed in the House of Commons by a vote of 144 to 114. Finance Minister Michael Wilson assured us that it was the best thing for the country. The Harold Ballard saga came to an end. Ballard died in the spring at the age of 86. And the Flames, who finished first in the Smythe Division, lost to the Los Angeles Kings in the first round of the playoffs 4-2, thus ending hopes for a Stanley Cup in 1990. Police were called to the St. Regis Akwesasne Reserve near Cornwall, Ontario, after 2 people were shot and killed in a months-long dispute over gambling. The 9,500 residents of the reserve were sharply divided over a half-dozen illegal gambling operations. It was a year when violence in the schools seemed on the rise and weapons were frequently confiscated from students. Parents at a Northeast elementary school were upset that a baptized Sikh girl was allowed to carry a ceremonial dagger known as a kirpan.
I get a little upset when I watch these guys telling us racial discrimination when my kids can get stabbed with that thing.
In May, Prime Minister Mulroney was left with just 6 weeks to get ratification of the Meech Lake Accord. 3 provinces, Manitoba, New Brunswick, and Newfoundland, would not accept the deal. Still, the Prime Minister refused to call a First Minister's meeting on the Constitution. But tempers were starting to grow short. Quebec's Robert Bourassa was in no mood to make any kind of a compromise.
Why I should compromise when my province said yes to Canada 3 times in the last decade? When we had a unanimous agreement on Meech Lake, on the priority to solve the Quebec, 3 times. So why I should be the one to compromise?
To make matters worse for the PM, Environment Minister Lucien Bouchard, one of Mulroney's oldest and closest friends, resigned from the cabinet and the Tory party, claiming that he couldn't put up with the changes to Meech Lake.
This report should not have existed. I am against it. And I find that I will have to leave the government with pain and with sadness, and I will have to sit as an independent member of Parliament.
The Calgary Flames fired head coach Terry Crisp. The Commons passed the Conservative government's abortion legislation. The Edmonton Oilers beat the Boston Bruins 4-1 to clinch their 5th Stanley Cup in 7 years. By the end of May, the 3 holdout provinces still refused to ratify the Meech Lake Accord. The June 23rd deadline was quickly approaching. Prime Minister Mulroney finally decided to call a First Minister's Conference to try to resolve the constitutional crisis. Day and night, the premiers met at the National Conference Center in Ottawa. The news media held vigil outside as the leaders did their best to reach an accommodation. The sessions were long and at times very heated. Finally, a 12th-hour deal was hammered out, and the holdout provinces agreed to take the plan back to their legislatures.
History will also record, very generously, that Premiers McKenna and Filmon and Wells have found it possible to expand the consensus, and in so doing, I believe that they have made a permanent contribution to the unity of Canada.
In the meantime, Manitoba New Democrat Elijah Harper began his one-man campaign against the Accord in his provincial legislature. Through a series of procedural tactics, he succeeded in delaying the introduction of the bill before the June 23rd deadline. The eyes of the nation turned to Calgary in June to see who would be named the next leader of the Liberal Party. Jean Chrétien was named on the first ballot with 57% of the vote, an unprecedented margin in recent political history. Calgarians were given a respite from the confrontations of the early summer when the Queen arrived on a state visit. An enthusiastic welcome at the Olympic Plaza was followed by a round of public appearances that included the presentation of new colors at McMahon Stadium and a tour of Spruce Meadows. In early July, a mallard on the Princess Island Lagoon was found to have its beak entangled in a plastic six-pack holder. For almost 2 weeks, Calgary Samaritans tried in vain to catch Ed the duck and free his bill from the man-made nightmare. Their efforts finally succeeded. On July 11th, Quebec police moved in to remove a barricade that Mohawk Indians had set up in order to block the expansion of a golf course near Oka. The raid failed, and a police officer was shot and killed. Mohawks at Chateauguay blockaded the Mercier Bridge that leads into Montreal in sympathy with their Oka brothers, and Indians across the country followed suit. Premier Bourassa was forced to call in the army, and Canadians were treated to the unaccustomed sight of their army confronting the so-called warriors in a standoff across the razor wire. In early August, Iraq invaded and annexed Kuwait, declaring it to be the 19th Iraqi province and calling the action comprehensive and eternal. President Saddam Hussein quickly found that he had provoked the ire of the entire world, even to the extent of bringing about an alliance between the U.S. and Russia. The prospect of war in the oil-rich Persian Gulf spurred a flurry of interest in Alberta's energy potential, and the daily spot price for crude soared to new highs. Cautious optimism prevailed as tension in the Middle East promised to improve the prospects for exploration and drilling in Western Canada. The Gulf crisis deepened as autumn neared. Saddam Hussein detained citizens of nations that opposed his expansionism and promised to use them as human shields. The Canadian government, with a hawkish Joe Clark in the lead, ordered 2 of its aging destroyers and a supply ship into the troubled area. 934 members of Canada's armed forces left Halifax for the Gulf on August 24th. The Canadian Army didn't have to go abroad to find trouble, however, as the summer-long confrontation in Oka approached a climax. In early September, the Army tore down the remaining barricades, and by the 27th, after 77 days of tension, Army discipline paid off, and the last of the warriors surrendered. Bob Rae surprised everyone, including himself, by leading his NDP party to its first provincial victory in Ontario history. Rae won 74 seats with only 37% of the vote.
Maybe a summer election wasn't such a bad idea after all.
After a month of defiant ditch digging, the Lone Fighter Society of the Piegan Indian Band was served with an injunction in September, ordering them to stop their activities. The plan to divert the waters of the Old Man River around the headworks of the Lethbridge Northern Irrigation System was halted, and Lone Fighters leader Milton Bourne with a Tooth was arrested. At year's end, the Lone Fighters are determined to begin anew next summer. The province is repairing the work of last summer, and Bourne with a Tooth is facing new charges. Alberta was the place to buy lotto tickets in 1990. No less than 14 residents of the province became millionaires in various lotteries. The Aryan nations invaded the tiny Alberta community of Provost in September. Their presence caused deep divisions within the community, and their plan to visit annually for a barbecue and cross burning was heartily opposed by most of the residents.
First annual means first, right? That means that they'll be back next year. And I don't want my kids to be surrounded by this. I don't want them to grow up thinking that because their skin is lighter or darker than someone else's that they're better or worse. It's wrong.
And Calgary Flames defenseman Al McGuinness, who was earlier acquitted of charges of aggravated assault, became a member of the NHL's $1 Million Club when he signed a 4-year contract for over $1 million a year. He joined such luminaries of the sport as Hull, Yzerman, Gretzky, and Lemieux. Construction got underway in October on Shell Oil's sour gas plant at Caroline. Called the last of the mega projects, the plant will cost about $850 million to build, and at the height of construction will create 1,600 jobs. Air Canada announced that it was laying off 2,900 employees, ranging from ramp handlers to customer service agents and pilots. Chairman Claude Taylor cited the recession and escalating oil prices as the reason. The Stampeders brought new life to professional football in Calgary by winning the Western Conference Championship for the first time in 19 years. They beat the Eskimos to lock up the title, only to lose to the same team in the playoffs. At the stroke of midnight on October 2nd, East and West Germany were united for the first time in 45 years. Millions of people thronged the streets of Berlin as the black and gold flag was raised to signal the birth of a new Germany. Local German Canadians joined in celebration of the event. After a 7-hour marathon of kazoo playing, filibustering, and general uproar, Liberal senators agreed to a truce, allowing debate to begin on the GST. The performance marked a new low on behalf of the senior chamber and led to renewed calls for Senate reform.
This is Professor Stewart from my alma mater, St. FX University.
And I tell you, this is tyranny. It is a day of infamy in parliamentary history.
The Prime Minister began November by appointing a 9-member National Unity Commission under Keith Spicer. The commission is charged with the duty of encouraging a national debate on the future of Confederation in the wake of the collapse of Meech Lake. The commission's report is due next Canada Day. McDonald's Corporation announced it was scrapping its styrofoam containers. A new, more environmentally friendly container was promised soon. The Calgary Colts won their second consecutive National Junior Football Championship. They overwhelmed the Windsor AKO Fratmen 50-15. 3 MPs, Liberal Lloyd Axworthy, New Democrats Ben Robinson, and Tory Bob Corbett, left for Iraq in an attempt to secure the release of 45 Canadian hostages. They left in frustration after a month having fallen short of their goal. Saddam Hussein did agree, however, to release 5 Canadians.
I'm gonna go up to him and I'm just gonna try and talk to him, and I'm just gonna give him a big hug, and I'm gonna tell him I love him and stuff, and I'm gonna give him the tape I made him, and I'm just gonna tell him how much I care, and hopefully it will hit him somehow, because he doesn't understand, what he puts us through,
The cultural event of the year for many young Calgarians was the concert appearance of the New Kids on the Block, a pop music phenomenon. The New Kids are rated as the 4th top-grossing act in show business, and no wonder. 18,000 tickets at a top price of $34.50 sold out so fast that they had to hold a second show 3 days later. Britain's longest-serving peacetime Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, stepped down in November after a stormy and eventful leadership career in which she literally turned the country around. She stepped down after failing to win decisively in a leadership review and was replaced by the 47-year-old son of a trapeze artist, John Major. Major becomes the youngest British Prime Minister of the century. Alberta privatized its phone industry in the fall of '90 with the largest share issue in Canadian history, 73 million shares. But it was barely large enough, as Albertans clamored to buy their individual allotments of $2,700 each. Shares were priced at $12 fully paid, with an unusual offering of share receipts at half that price, but carrying the full dividend. Such was the demand that would-be buyers had their allotments cut down to just 900 shares each. Saddam Hussein gave many Canadians, including some from Calgary, an early Christmas gift by unexpectedly releasing all of the remaining hostages in his custody. The CBC, under continuing pressure to pare its operating costs, slashed 10 stations and about 1,100 employees from its payroll in mid-December. Among the casualties was the Calgary television station, along with its 90 staff members. There was a swift reaction from outraged Calgarians who felt that the city was too important to be left out of the network's plans.
Well, I think it's really a disaster. I watch the NewsHour myself, in fact, and to me, the CBC is a Canadian institution, and I think it deserves support.
Your decision is insulting to all of us who reside in Calgary.
There were other federal plans unveiled in December. The most awaited of these was the so-called Green Plan for a Healthy Environment. While it was less than environmentalists had hoped for, the Green Plan did take the initiative in an area where it was sorely needed. $3 billion of new money is promised to be spent either cleaning up the environment or studying it over the next 5 years.
Many people are saying integrate economy and environment in decision-making. Make the cabinet aware of environment, economy issues when they make decisions. That initiative was not taken, and that was a great opportunity lost.
It was in every sense a revolutionary year, one that saw both dramatic endings and new beginnings. It's hard to imagine what 1991 might hold to top the year that's ending. But whatever that might be, we intend to cover it for you here on CFCN Television News. I'm Gord Kelly.